What is up, everybody? If you have landed on this video, it's because you came here from my Larevo video, and you're interested in hearing my opinion on how I differentiate between something that I would consider a collector piece versus just a general EDC. As I mentioned in the main video, the lines are very blurred here, so I by no means intend to imply that anything that I'm saying is true or correct. That is not the goal with this video. What I'm simply doing here is explaining my opinion and how I feel that distinction is made for me personally, based on the price points that I'm comfortable with and the fear that I have towards damaging my items of value. So let me just jump right into it. As I state in the main video, I consider all of these to be EDCs, and I consider this to be more of a collector piece. So there are two kind of main areas that I want to get at. The first is how much of a knife's design and build is sort of geared towards carryability and usability, and then also how much what materials the knife is using and kind of the detail within those materials. So one of the main things that's going to distinguish this as the collector piece for me is one, that there are aspects of the knife that are clearly not geared towards EDC ability or use. One is the overall weight of the knife in comparison to the size. It's an extraordinarily heavy knife for its size. And, you know, there could have been efforts made into internal milling and stuff like that if the goal was to sort of lean in that direction, and yet those actions were not taken, and therefore that says to me that this was meant to have more of a feeling of solidity and something that feels like something that you want to appreciate in your hand rather than run out and go dig in the soil with. And, you know, that also kind of goes into the balance. You know, I can get the knife to balance on my finger if I'm using the fat part of my finger, but frankly, the knife is heavier on this back side, and a little bit of movement will make that apparent. Truly balanced knife, you should be able to do this, and it's not going to go anywhere. So, you know, that's clearly geared more towards kind of like a premium feel as opposed to something that is super usable like a light Shirogorov. You know, this knife is rather large in comparison, but it's significantly lighter. It's something that I can wield more easily and everything like that. And then in regards to the material aspect, you know, I typically feel that certain materials really lend themselves to being collector piece materials, although I do not think that they automatically make a knife fit into one or the other description, and I actually have a good example of that sitting in front of me. So I would say that knives that have a Damascus or a Damascus are going to be leaning a little bit more towards the collector piece side, just because you really don't want to damage this finish. You know, it's going to be very obvious and apparent, and it really takes away from the aesthetic beauty of the knife. But I did say that I consider this knife to be more EDC, and you can see that it has a Damascus blade as well. So that is not a one-size-fits-all attitude that I have towards exotic materials. And you can obviously see that I'm just as excited to call this piece a general EDC, even though it has a black Damascus clip and these full zirconium scales. You can see it already does have some scratches on it. That'll teach me to hand my customs to my father, who grabbed the knife with the same hand as his key and put a little scuff on there. And quite frankly, this Gavco is really on the border for me of almost being more of a collector piece. In fact, I think I might come around to changing my mind on this one as well and saying it's less EDC friendly. You know, the Damascus clip doesn't do so well in the pocket, and the knife is equally as sort of distorted in heaviness as the Larevo. One thing that I do know about Mike, though, is that he would absolutely bite my head off if he found out that I said his knife was something to be like a safe queen or cherished. You know, he's very much a guy who wants to take one of his awesome custom pieces and take it out in the woods and do whatever with it. So I know that he definitely has the intention with his knives of them being EDC'd, and I'm sure Jason does as well. It's not really fair for me to pigeonhole what his intentions of his knives are, because I didn't ask him that question, so that wouldn't be fair to put words in his mouth. But anyway, moving on, you could see something like a Thorburn and see this beautiful kind of hand-etched design in this titanium and a really amazing material like this lightning strike carbon fiber and a beautiful hand-rub satin finish blade that just took hours and hours to finish. You could easily call this a collector piece for fear of damaging it, but really the clip is designed for EDC use. The weight is distributed well. It's very easy to hold the knife. It's fairly light for its size. It's actually extraordinarily light for its size. It has incredible ergonomics for multiple sized hands, whereas the Larevo fits my hand very well, but somebody else might want one a little bit differently shaped. You also have this gorgeous long recurve blade that has a nice thin stock, or at least it's thin thanks to the hollow grind, so it's thin behind the edge, which makes it a really great slicer. And ultimately, it feels fairly geared towards EDC. Now, talking about the Damascus on this Arucus, you can see it's not quite as detailed as some of the like the Damascus that you find on the Larevo, and so it's something that I'm not quite as afraid of scratching up. And yeah, I'm realizing that the deeper I get into this video that it's actually really hard to distinguish what I'm talking about, but I just feel like all of these knives, they have there are thoughts going into things like weight savings. There are thoughts going into things like how effective the clip is. The clip on the Larevo is great in that it slides in and out of the pocket, but it is steel, and it does not make contact with the scale, so it doesn't actually bend too much. It has enough looseness to get over your pocket, but it doesn't make for quite the best clip, whereas you can see I like the ceramic ball clips quite a lot. But and that's another thing that kind of takes this into the collector territory as well. They're just not quite as EDCable. You know, they're more susceptible to obvious damages based on the materials, and they don't have quite as much consideration taken into things like weight or how effective the clip is, which isn't to say that that's because of the maker's flaw, because it's not. You can see that Mike knows how to make a clip perfectly well, and I could say the same thing if I had another one of Jason's knives sitting here as well, but it's the materials that they're made out of which impose restrictions on the makers, and so sometimes when you want some of those more exotic materials showing up on your knives, you do sacrifice a little bit of that usability, and that's totally fine. So I guess really the point of this video is just to say that we all kind of have different ideas of what is a collector piece in our heads, but for me personally, it's things like the weight of this knife that's clearly geared towards a feeling of premium quality and a feeling of appreciation in a controlled setting, and then also the sheer awesomeness of the materials used and how susceptible they are to obvious aesthetic damage. But it really is a blurred line, as you can see with things like the Thorburn. That's really close. This has Damascus steel, which is really close. And then another thing that I brought this out for is because some people might consider this a collector piece. You know, this is a much cheaper knife. It's much cheaper materials, and it is a production knife, but it is the first run of 100, and for some people those are what make a piece a collector piece versus not. You know, there are certainly people out there who are going to have bought this Glimpse at Blade Show and have the first run of 100, and then they might go buy the exact same knife from you know, a normal dealer like Blade HQ when the knives actually come out, and they'll have one that they use and that they get scratches on and that they take with them, and then they'll have another one, their first of 100 production run, you know, in a safe case somewhere. So we all have these kind of different perspectives on, you know, what is a collection piece, what is not, but that is what distinguishes them for me personally in my collection, and it's really this piece and probably this piece as well that find themselves into that description for me. But again, I have no safe queens. Every single one of these knives goes in my pocket. Every single one of these knives cuts things, and that's really important for me. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.